So those of you that follow me on Instagram, hint hint nudge nudge, go follow me, will be aware that I have suggested that the SWAS layout might be exhibiting in 2020. This came about initially because I mentioned at my model railway club that I was building a layout, and it gets jokingly suggested that it will be in next year's show. This became so frequent, it actually came to a point where I thought, you know what if? So there we go. What if this layout could be ready for January 2020? So I've got just shy of a year to finish the SWAS layout, so let's do this. So what exactly is the SWAS layout? Well, it's a 00 gauge rough representation of a pre-war 1930s Henley-on-Thames, which is just near Reading off of the Great Western Main Line. If any one of you have ever been to the current Henley-on-Thames station, you'll realise it looks absolutely nothing like this, because over the years the line and the station have been stripped, singled and simplified. I chose Henley for a few reasons. One, it's a terminus. I didn't have enough room to make a roundy layout at this time, so it had to be an end-to-end jobby. Two, I can run both small branch line trains and also larger expresses from this station, as Castle hauled expresses from Paddington were somewhat frequent into this station, even if it was only a small branch line 35 miles from London itself. 3, this is a big one, this one. I used to work on the line, and personal local history is always a large influencing factor in layouts. So what still needs to be done for this layout to be at an exhibition? Well, the list is rather large, but I'll whiz through it. The platforms need finishing, the station train shed needs building, the loco yard needs finishing, the ballasting needs finishing and weathering, signals need to be made and motorised, signalling and point runs need to be finished, the goods yard needs finishing, the bridge and hills at the end need making and finishing, the fiddle yard needs to be built, the control panel needs to be rebuilt, and there's a load of little details too that need to be made up. So, before we look at what we're going to be doing today, hit those like and subscribe buttons and I'll be very fond of you. Right then, what are we doing today? I'm going to be building the last platform. This method that I've chosen is super simple, pretty cheap, and it looks alright. Mostly because I do say so myself. So, what do we need? We need some Wills brick sheet, some Wills Victoria stone paving, some 6mm and 1.5mm balsa wood, N-gauge fine ballast, model filler, track pins, PVA glue, poly cement, paint and thinners. To start with, cut down the 6mm balsa to a 15mm high strip. Chances are you need a fair bit of this, so make up a couple of strips. Then, if you want to have some ramps at the end, cut this into the strips that require it. I found that an 18mm ramp makes a good incline. Next, make these strips into a length that will fit into the platform space. This may mean that you'll have to cut it down, or you'll have to attach another strip onto the end. If 2 strips are required to join, then a few track pins and a bit of 1.5mm balsa wood was used to connect it together. Next, the wheel's brick sheeting was cut to size. This was cut into strips that were 11 bricks high. Sounds precise, but it's pretty much 15mm high, that is. Once this has been cut to size and cleaned up, using a flat edge and some scrap thin plastic sheet, these were all glued to the right length, ensuring that they all remained perfectly straight. Once this glue had dried, I put some filler into the joints to try and disguise them. This was then sanded flat. I actually used a Dremel attachment for this because I'm really lazy. Normal sanding is also an option here. The filler was then inscribed with the new brickwork, following the pre-existing contours on the sheet. Lastly, this was all rubbed with a fiberglass pencil to smooth out any harsh edges that had been created. And now it's time for the first layer of paint. This was just a regular brick colour, to both hide the filler and get rid of the plasticiness of the brick sheet. This was then varnished with some matte coat. This is because the next step has the ability to make the brick paint run and also mix. And there is a very strong possibility that I learnt this the hard way on previous platforms. Now, take some thinner and some white paint and mix it at about 50-50. And paint this all along the brickwork, making sure it gets into all the recesses. Once that's on, wipe over the top of the brickwork with a tissue to remove any white that has remained on the top, and then leave that too to dry. Next, take a bit of Yoo-hoo and glue the plasticard brickwork to the balsa wood. There's a strong chance you'll need to clamp this into place and then allow that to dry. Now it's time to start putting the platforms in place. With a bit of PVA glue on the bottom of the platform, get it roughly into the right place. And then taking the widest logos and coaches you have, run them down the platform, making sure that the platform is never too far away from the stock, and also that it doesn't touch anywhere, as that is a bit of an issue. This may take a few attempts and a little bit of time, but it does pay off. Once you've got your position, use some weights to hold it in place and leave it completely to dry. Do this with all necessary sides of the platforms. Sometimes it helps to force some bits into place. For example, between these two platform edges here, I put some widthways balsa to hold the sides apart. And on the other side, I use some plasticard to push the platform away from the track. If you have a larger area to cover, then you'll need to put a bit of structure underneath the platform, otherwise the new balsa will sag. As you can see here, I've got a bit of a superstructure made underneath using some of the spare bits, the 15mm balsa wood strips. Now it's time for the top of the platform. So I took my ruler and found the widest part of the platform, and then cut the balsa to a rectangle that was that width wide. This oversized piece of ballast was then pinned and glued onto the top of the platform. At the ramp, I needed quite a few track pins to stop the balsa wood pinging up or drying in an incorrect shape. Once the glue was dry, it was then trimmed to be the perfect size of the platform using a knife cutting vertically. Where two pieces of balsa wood came together, I covered the join with a bit of newspaper PVA glued into position. I also used the same technique at the end of the ramp. Once all that glue had dried, I took some of the Wills Victoria stone paving and cut it up into strips, and glued them round the edge of the platform with a bit of Yoo-hoo. Before painting, if there are any sizable gaps between the strips, then a bit of filler was used and sanded smooth again. I then painted the strips, including the edges and any balsa wood that was visible on the edges. And then once that had dried, the middle area was then filled with fine N-gauge ballast to mimic gravel. This was then glued down with some watered down PVA. However, if you have any platform furniture like lamps or canopies or station names, etc., these will need to be installed before the last step is completed, otherwise you just won't get it down. And there we go. That is the platform pretty much complete. Now it's just time to add some ballasting on the track, buffer stops at the end, and a bit of weathering just to seal it all together. But I'm going to save that for another video. We've gone on quite a lot of time so far. So thanks for watching. If you've made it this far, well done. Reward yourself by clicking that big old subscribe button, or check out some more of my other videos.